Hello everyone, hi. Welcome back, and today I thought we would have a little bit of a play day. So what we're going to do today is we're going to play with all these mediums. Now, as it happens, I have all these mediums. They'll just happen to be Winsor Newton. I do know that there are a lot of other companies who make various mediums of different kinds. It just so happens that mine are Winsor Newton. I've collected these over a number of years, and also some have been given to me. So just coincidentally, they're all Winsor Newton. So let's jump in here. Go to this. There we go. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to be working on arches, 140-pound cold pressed paper. I'm using mainly, not 100%, but I've got mostly Da Vinci watercolors. I do have some Winsor Newton. I do have some Core. I also have the occasional Daniel Smith or Holbein maybe. I've got a variety in any case. I'm going to use some synthetic brushes, and I'm going to use a separate palette today because when I use these mediums, I don't really want anything in my main palette to get contaminated. So I'm going to be doing a lot, like if I'm applying a medium, I'm going to be doing it over here just to make sure that I, keep my palette clean. So good morning, everybody, or afternoon or evening or whatever time it is where you happen to be. I'm just reading the comments here, and got all over the place. There's actually a great long list. I better not go into reading it all, but I always love seeing where you're from. Thank you very much for being here. So, all right, so let's take a look at some of the mediums that we're going to use. We're just going to jump right in. And I've got, first of all, this one's called Lifting Preparation. And for this lifting preparation, I mean, the name is in the title. You need to prepare your paper before painting it. So what I'm going to do first of all is to zoom in. This is what it looks like. It's even in the old style bottles, so you know how long I've had these things. But as far as I know, I don't know if the mediums actually have an expiry date. Of course, there's no expiry date on them, but I presume that they would be okay to use. Now, I'm just going to start my first square. I'm going to take a shape, and let's do a circle. Okay, so I'm going to do a circle here, and I'm going to mark it so that I know what I've done here. Lifting preparation. All right, so I mark my little demo here with my lifting preparation, and I'm going to open this up. It's very clear, as you can see. It's, really doesn't have very much color to it at all. And I'm going to make sure I'm using a nice clean brush. And I'm just going to dip this in and prepare this area to paint. So I'm going to put this on here, and I'm going to allow it to dry, and then we'll see what it's like to paint on this afterwards, whether it makes any difference in the painting or whether or not it it's the same. Now, I'm using just 140-pound cold pressed paper for all of the little samples that I'll do today. I'm not going to do a deep dive into various different types of paints and different types of papers and things like that. I mean, there's so many variables that this could really get quite, this could turn into a huge project. But we're just going to do some basics on one type of paper, one type of, or maybe just a couple of basic colors and things like that. And we will sort of experiment. But I will talk about those things, different kinds of paper that you might use and things like that. So, so that lifting preparation, you can see it's nice and shiny, but it's going to have to dry. And so I'm just going to leave that one for now. I'll come back to that one. Now, I have not personally used all of these mediums myself, so this is going to be a first for me as well. So one of the mediums that I have never tried before is this texture medium. A friend of mine gave me a little sampling from her stash. So this is a texture medium, and I'm going to try mixing this directly into my paint. So I'm going to bring my palette over here, and I'm going to put my paint on first, and then I'll add the color into it. So for this, I'm going to use, I'll use a French ultramarine blue. Okay, so I'm going to use some French ultramarine blue. Get that mixed in there. I've got a little bit granulating here, as French ultramarine has that characteristic where it granulates. You know, it kind of looks like a little bit of sand is in it, but that's just the undissolved pigment. Okay, so we've got this texture medium. I have cleaned out my brush so that I don't contaminate the medium or my paint. And let's make sure my brush is nice and clean. And this has a little bit of thickness to it, but not as much as I would have expected for a texture medium. But let's move this into, let's grab some of that. And I can tell when I pick that up that it's got a little bit more body to it. So I'm going to mix that in, and immediately I feel like I can sort of create a little bit of texture. Now I don't want to put that back in there. So I'm going to try painting some of this on my paper. And I can actually sort of, it seems to make a little bit of a wake as I make my brush strokes. So I can see that this would actually make some texture. Now we'll see how that dries. I'm going to rinse this out, maybe add a little bit more color and some of the medium, because I really want to see, you know, how pronounced I can make this texture if I'm, you know, using a texture medium. So let's mix that up a little bit. I'm going to reduce the size of this palette here so you don't need to see that quite so big. And we can see this area here better. All right, making sure I got all that pigment dissolved, but rinse out my brush really well. Nothing left in my brush, so I'll go into my texture medium again. Let's put a little more on this time. And it's a little gelatin-like, I guess, is kind of how it feels and looks. All right, so we're gonna just do a little bit of texturing here, hopefully. We'll see what that looks like. Maybe I'll try even painting over that afterwards to see if that will paint, like if I could be able to glaze over that in the same way, or whether it's going to actually, the paint will sort of settle in the valleys. That might be something worth experimenting with. So I'm going to wipe that off. Get that medium off of my palette here. I presume that this would, I'm also maybe going to try to see if I can move that again after it is dried. I don't know whether texture medium for watercolor is going to dry to retain its texture, or whether I can actually smooth it out again. I don't know. So that color that I used, that French ultramarine, you noticed how granulating that was, correct? So I do know that some paints are naturally granulating, and French ultramarine blue is one of those. It naturally has that granulation, but not every color has that sort of natural granulation. Some of them are a little bit smoother. So phthalo, pretty much phthalo anything, it's very staining color. It's very, very smooth, but it doesn't have that granulation. So I'm going to try the granulation medium with some of that ultramarine blue. It's already granulating, so we know that it's going to granulate, but we're going to see if it creates even more granulation. And then I'm going to try it with one of the colors I know is going to be smoother, so maybe a permanent rose or something like that. So I'm only changing colors because I know that it's a different kind of paint. So the granulation medium, as I understand it, can be mixed directly with the paint. So I could bring my palette over, I could mix the granulation medium with the paint itself, or I can add the granulation medium directly to my paper after applying the color. So let's try a little bit of both there. So I'm going to use a little pipette and take some of this, and I'm going to put some in this little well there. And this looks very much like water. Doesn't look like much, but the idea here is that it will separate the pigment granules, or cause the pigment to separate to give us that illusion of the granulation. Now, the kind of paper you use will make a difference. If you're using a rough textured paper, of course, it's got little more, like lots more pockets on the surface of the paper for the paint to settle into. So you're automatically going to get more of a granulation effect just from the paper. But if you used a smooth paper, that might not be so easy. So I'm taking some of my French ultramarine blue, and you can see it's really granulating. And I'm going to mix some of that in. I probably got too much there, so let's take some of the pigment. We'll pull it out here. And you can see that, just its natural form, it is pretty granulating. All right, so I've got that, blended in as much as I can. I'm going to grab a little more of that granulation medium and see what happens. All right, so I'm going to put some of this is granulation medium, and as I paint that on, and you don't always notice these things when they're wet, but when they start drying, you'll really start to see the granulating effects. So I'm going to paint the same thing, but I'm going to do this one in, I'll do it in something that I know is not granulating. I said that I would use permanent rose. So I'm going to take my permanent rose here. That's just permanent rose and nothing added to it right now. And if I just paint that on the paper, that's a pretty smooth texture. So, granulation medium. I'm not going to use the one that I kind of contaminated there, so I'll just take a couple of drops from here and I will mix it into the paint. And we'll try painting that and see how effective the granulation medium will work there with a color we know isn't naturally granulating. Okay, so that's with it. Both of these samples are with it added in. And you can see what they look like with that added in. Now let's try adding a little bit of the granulation medium on top. And I think this is the way that I have seen it used more often, is by adding this on top. So I'm just going to take my little pipette and I'm going to add this in. And we'll see how much we can get this to start to do its effect. And I'm going to roll it around a little bit. There's some interesting things happening. Look what's happening with this blue. And I'm going to roll it around and see if I can really get this flowing. And it's kind of doing an effect like curdled milk. You know, like if you put like a drop of vinegar in milk, how it would curdle like that. And that's kind of what I'm getting. But this, look at this one here. Now this one does not naturally have those granules. And now this is starting to really create that granulation effect. I think this one made this funny effect because the paint was starting to dry. But let's wet this and spread it around. And you'll really see how it works on its own. So there's some really cool granulation there. Now, granulation is something that I don't use that much in my painting unless I am deliberately trying to do a landscape with texture or something like that. I mean, as you know, I do a lot of portraiture. I do birds and animals and things like that. So I don't have need of a lot of granulation, but in landscape, boy, this would be fantastic. But you can definitely see the granulation in the pink one. That's really worked out quite well. And I'm looking at this texture one. This is the texture medium. I better mark these. Texture medium. And this is granulation medium. I think I may have to experiment a little bit more with granulation medium. I'm kind of liking the effect there. I'm starting to get inspired about different ways to do this. So by my having all of these mediums and sort of giving it to you sort of the buckshot approach of presenting all of these mediums, it'll give you an idea of what they are, what they're used for, and whether or not you really want to invest in something that you might use in your painting. I know some of mine, I just kind of bought them on a whim, and what happens there is that, you get a whole bottle that, you don't use. So you can maybe make your decision as to what you might want to add to your painting or, your kit based on, your application. So let's go back to this lifting preparation one. It's starting to look pretty dry. I don't know if it's 100% dry yet. I'm going to leave that a little bit longer. Crackle paste. I have not used crackle paste. That is one that I don't have. So, of course, I'm only sharing with you the ones that I have, or the ones that I have access to. But I know that there's tons of other ones. Like there's like a modeling paste, I think. There's, I don't know if Winsor Newton makes that one. I think it's Schminke or Holbein perhaps. I can't remember who makes the modeling paste for watercolor. Like, so you put this on you can either mix your paint into it, but I would think that would use up a lot of paint, or you could paint on top of it afterwards, and that's kind of a cool one too. That one I definitely have to try. I think that would be really cool to do, especially if I'm using a like a board where I'm not putting it under glass, and I might be putting like, a varnish or something over top of my watercolor. That could be fun. Yeah, crackle would be a fun one to use. That I might have to try that one too. But anyway, that's one I don't have, so I can't show that one today. But what I do have is, you can really see, look at this one. This one's interesting. It's already a granulating color, and I added it in, and it's making these like little it's almost like fracturing the paint, if you will. Whereas the smooth one kind of made it speckled, like it's got little grains of sand or something in it. It's kind of interesting. This one's starting to dry. I can actually feel that texture. I actually put my finger in it. Some of it was wet though. But I can physically see that texture on my paper. It's probably not that noticeable on the camera. I wouldn't say it's tremendously noticeable in person either. And it's not raised up, not like the modeling paste I was just talking about, but it is creating a texture on there. So yeah, so you can kind of manipulate your texture and put that around. We'll come back to that lifting preparation in a minute. Let's move on. You've probably seen, well, I've shown you masking fluid, correct? And now there's this creature called permanent masking medium. This one is a weird one. Personally, I have seen this demonstrated, and it works pretty well. But as the name suggests, it's permanent. You cannot take it off. Like, it is on there forever. Okay, forever. So interesting. You can mix paint into this medium. Not so much with the other one. I have regular masking fluid, and then there's the permanent masking fluid. And you can, this one is removable, of course, as it suggests. And this one, you can add a little color to it, but it's really just only so that you can see what you're painting, or like where you're masking. This one, if you added color to it, that's the permanent color that's going to be on your paper. Now, the thing that I have personally found with this one is that it is a little shiny when it's done. But so let's have a look here. We'll try a little bit of both. So, child-proof lids, you gotta love them, right? And wow, I don't know if I can even get this one off. I might have to use pliers. This one's really tight. I should have tried this before I started today, but I think I got it. Yeah, I had to use pliers to get it off. So there we go. So we've got this permanent masking fluid, and I'm not going to use my pipette because it'll be in my pipette forever. But I'm going to just drip a little bit in onto my palette here. Just make sure it's mixed up. Stir it maybe. It's very, very runny, very fluid, much more thin than my removable masking fluid. It's a lot more thin, so I'm just going to pour a little bit into here. Hopefully I don't spill it all over the place. Okay, wipe that edge off. Anytime you use your masking fluid, I would wipe that off. Put that lid back on. Okay, so I've got a little bit in there. I'm going to move my camera here for a second. There we go. Just going to get my camera in focus there. Hopefully that works. Okay, so I'm going to first try painting the masking fluid on the paper directly, but before I do that, I don't want to ruin a brush. So if I don't want to ruin a brush, I'm going to put soap on it so that it acts like a barrier. Now I have to do that with the regular latex masking fluid. I don't even know if I need to do this for this one. If you know that answer, you let me know, but I'm not going to take the chance. I'm going to put some soap on my brush because soap acts like a barrier cream and prevents the regular masking fluid from adhering to the bristles of the brush. So I'm going to use a inexpensive brush for this. So I'm going to put it in some regular soap, nothing fancy, it's just an ordinary soap, like what you use to wash your hands with. You could use a bar of soap, it doesn't matter. And the idea here is just make sure you coat the bristles fully, right up to the ferrule. It doesn't have to be gobs of soap on there, it just needs to be covered. All right, so with this, I can go directly into the masking fluid, and I'm going to paint. I'm going to paint a big area. It's colorless, so you're not probably seeing too much unless there's shine. Let's move that down a bit. Okay, so this is masking, permanent masking fluid on dry paper. Pretty much any masking fluid you would put on dry paper, I believe. Although I have seen the regular masking fluid used on damp paper, which to my surprise actually worked, which I'll do after this. Okay, so I've painted in a block here, right? You can see that I've painted that in. And now I'm going to take a brush and I'm going to add some color to this. I'm going to do it two ways. I'm going to take some yellow here next door, and then I'm going to scoop in some permanent masking fluid into that. Let that drip down the side here. And I'm going to mix this yellow into the masking fluid. So now I have yellow masking fluid. Which is permanent. This will stay on the paper. This will not come off. It's not designed to come off. But this is what I understand is the unique thing about the permanent masking fluid. It's a very thin consistency. You can mix it with color and the color will stay on there. So you can see maybe why that might be helpful if you were doing like lettering or something like that, and then you wanted to put a wash over top and not have that on there to ruin things. So I'm going to soak my brush again because I did rinse that. In fact, I don't think I had soap on it when I put it into the color in the first place, so I might have killed my brush. I hope not, but all right, so now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add some red to this. Plain shiny masking fluid be a good look for painting pearls. Possibly, Margot. I suppose it could. I have some better ideas on that though, so which I'll get to. I'm going to use a little bit of, this is permanent rose. I'm going to let that drip down. I'm using my nice brush, so I don't want it to get into the permanent masking fluid where it's could potentially mess up my brush. All right, so now I'm going to mix this together. I've got a soapy brush, mixing it now with red. Now here's the reason I'm mixing two things. My last time I tried this permanent masking, because I get asked this a lot, why, what's the purpose of permanent masking? What's the purpose of it? And I saw a demonstration where it was painted on and it was dark, and then you put a light color over top, and it was, you know, it was fine. But I wanted to do it both ways, because what I tried was I did a light color and then I tried to put a dark color on top, and I didn't really love that effect too much, but I'm going to try it again. Never say die. And there we go. All right, so this is all permanent masking fluid. Get all that out of my brush. Hopefully I haven't killed it. We shall see. I don't know what the composition of the permanent masking fluid is. I don't know what's in it. I do know that regular masking fluid is latex, liquid latex, ammonia, and probably a few other things. But I know the main ingredients are ammonia and liquid latex. All right, so I'm going to mark this. This is permanent masking fluid. Which doesn't look anything right now. It just looks like paint. We'll have to let that dry. And I don't know if this is going to kill my palette, so I'm going to remove the masking fluid from my palette now, because I don't want it to be permanent in my palette. So take that out right away. Staining a bit, but that's the color, not the fluid. And get some more paper towel. All right. Guess I don't need this granulation medium anymore either, so I'll take that out as well. All right, so let's talk about one of the other mediums. And some of these we're coming back to revisit, but we have to do this preparation first. So since we're doing it live, you know, we're not just going to sit around waiting for paint to dry. I'm going to keep moving along. So we're going to come back to visit this, but everything's marked so I know what it is. Okay, so let's try the next one. The next one is gum arabic. And gum arabic is this sort of amber color, and it is, as most people know, it's the binder for watercolor. So you take pigment and you add gum arabic, possibly a little bit of glycerin, but this will add to your watercolor. I use it for a number of different things. I would say this is my go-to medium for several things because it is very versatile. I'm going to take a little gum arabic and I'll just put it into my palette here. And you can see it's a little bit of a thicker consistency, right? So one of the reasons that I like gum arabic so much is that if I have a paint that's all dried up, for example, I have a palette over here. I don't know what's in here exactly, but let me just try this other palette. So I've got a palette. This is my sort of spare colors that I've acquired, and sometimes they get really crackly, you know, and these ones aren't too bad because I regularly add a little bit of the gum arabic to it, but the sometimes they will crackle, as you can see. You know, basically the nice consistency has gone away, and so I will put maybe a drop of gum arabic into my water, and then I will add that into this well and stir up the paint when it gets nice and gooey, and it sort of revives that dried up crackled paint. Some pigments just naturally do crackle like that. That's just the nature of that particular pigment, but I do find that that helps. And it can also be used for a flowing agent. So in other words, you add it to your paint, and because it's the thicker sort of syrupy kind of consistency, it mixes in with your color and allows it to sit on the surface a little bit more. So in that sense, it's quite good. And because it doesn't create a a paint that soaks into your paper as much, it means that that paint can also be removed a little bit more easily. So for certain things, it can be really good. So I'm going to take some gum arabic, and I'm going to mix it in with some color. So I'm going to take, let's take that, I'll take some permanent rose again, just so we keep the colors fairly consistent here. So I'm going to take some permanent rose, add some of that gum arabic to it. Now here's where you have to be careful, because if I take a drop of gum arabic just by itself, it may be too much. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you on my palette. I'm going to take some of this gum arabic, I'm going to put it in the well next to it. Now I'm going to add lots of water to that. So only a little gum arabic and a fair bit of water. Right? It's kind of thicker, so I don't want to add too much in, but this will help to smooth things out when I actually go to paint like a wash or something. It helps to even out the flow, so you don't get the brush marks and things. But adding too much can create problems. Well, problems, or maybe depends on how you want to term that, because if I go directly into the gum arabic and I add it into my color, first of all, it makes it thick, kind of like this, that texture medium that we used earlier. Makes it thicker like that, but if I paint this on, you can see that it's a little bit different, it doesn't go as far because it's got the thicker pigment in it, but they look fairly similar, but we're going to see how that dries. And you'll see the problem with using the gum arabic directly is that it can create a shine on your paper that you don't want. Now, Margot, you had suggested about the pearls. So what I suggest to you is that you can take gum arabic, paint a drop, so a pearl, let's say this is a pearl, and you put some gum arabic on top, allow that to dry. It will give a really nice sort of shiny finish to those little areas, or water drops. Say you have a painting and it has water drops and you want to get that shiny look. This could be a really cool way to do it. So now I'm going to do a few more drops because I want to experiment with something. I haven't tried this myself, but I want to try something. I want to see what happens if I use a little bit of gum arabic, kind of like a resist. I don't know if it'll work or not, but I'm just going to do a few drops here. All right, so just so you can see what I've done, I'm experimenting live with you guys, but you can see the drops that I put on there. It's 5 little drops, and we'll see what those look like once they're dry. All right, so this is gum arabic. And let's keep going here. So there's another product that I have. We had actually a representative from Winsor and Newton come to visit one of my art groups, and she had demonstrated this, and she also had a lot of product for sale. So I don't think at that time that there was as much awareness of you know, animals and being used in products and things like that. But this is called Gall liquid. They now produce one that's called synthetic Gall liquid, and it is, just as the name suggests, liquid from the gallbladder of an ox. So that's what this product is. Be aware, you know, that that is not a vegan product. So I've just had this for, I'm embarrassed to say how long I've had this, probably 25, 30 years. But anyway, I'm going to go into this, and I'm going to try adding a little bit of this to my color, to my paint. So I'm going to use my dropper, my pipette. I don't want to put my brush into it, so I'll just come over here to my palette once again, and I'm going to put a couple of drops of this, and I'm going to mix that in with my color. So we're going to see what kind of a difference it makes by adding the Gall liquid. As I had it demonstrated, it increases the flow of your watercolors. So I'm going to do two things here. I'm going to try a little brushed on the paper and then paint into it. Let's get a little more out here. I'm going to take some and brush into some that's been painted on the paper, and then I will use a little bit in my paint directly. So let's, I'm going to take maybe a flat brush for this. And I'm just going to paint some of this liquid on the paper. And this is, oh, it's smelly. This is to increase the flow of your watercolor. All right, so I've got some painted directly on my paper here. Now I'm going to go into my paint, and maybe I'll try a cobalt blue here. And I'm going to paint into this and see how the paint really just spreads like crazy. And normally you would get that sort of effect on wet paper, but it will flow pretty smoothly on this, which isn't really that wet. It's hardly got any shine at all. A lot of it has just absorbed into the paper. I'm going to take some of that permanent rose and put that in as well. Just see how things flow together here. And let's try tipping and tilting and seeing, you know, how fast does this paint flow, and it doesn't, it's melting together pretty nice. It's flowing slower than it would if it was just water. And I'm tipping it this way and seeing how that's going to flow. So I can see this being a really useful thing for things like, you know, doing nice washes, getting stuff to really melt together nicely. It really wants to move that color. You know, and I'm tilting my board, I'm letting gravity move it around, but it's flowing together pretty nice. And we'll see how that dries. Now I'm going to try a little directly into the liquid. And I can't say that I'm noticing too much of a difference where it's mixed directly into the paint. It feels pretty much like the same kind of application, but we'll see what that looks like when it's dry. And all right, so let's clean up this palette a little bit. Oh, Natalie, you bought the powdered gum arabic. What do you need to use to make it liquid to stop to drop into dried pans? Um, Honestly, I'm really not sure. I know that the powdered one is used a lot in things like ceramics. I don't know a lot of people who use the powdered form of the gum arabic in use with their watercolors. Could be done. I'm not aware of it. But I would maybe fire off a question to the manufacturer of whoever you got the powdered gum arabic from. So let's, I'm cleaning things up here a little bit. Just trying to get all these mediums out of here so that I don't cross-contaminate. And okay, so what I'm kind of observing here with this Gall liquid is that I have often seen those sort of like little streamers that come off of your paint into a wet surface. You know, they really trickle out, and this one seems to be really leveling a little bit more and sort of blending in a little bit smoother. Okay, so I'm going to mark this down. This is Gall liquid, and as I said, they have now synthetic Gall liquid, which I don't have because I have the original. So as far as I know, they are designed to do exactly the same thing, but you know, one is just obviously animal friendly. Although I believe both are still available. All right, so that's the Gall liquid. I should put this one's mixed in paint. I'll just make that note. I will say this though, that is really smooth. Like that's a smooth color. Now that it is a color that tends to be a little bit smooth to begin with. I'd be interested to see what that looks like mixed into something that's granulating. I wonder if that would make any difference. Let's give it a go. I'm going to put a little bit on my palette. Rinse my brush and pick up some. I'm going to go into maybe my cobalt and give that a try. Or actually I'll do cobalt. Cobalt's a granulating color. So I'm going to mix this into this is the Gall mixed with the paint. This is cobalt. We'll see if this becomes granulating or smooths out something that would otherwise be a little granulating. Well, it's not really showing the brush marks, which is a good thing. It's really looking pretty good. So we'll see how that one dries. Okay, so what have we not played with here? We have not played with this little one. This one's called Iridescent Medium. I think I talked about this one once before. But this one, as you can see, it's very pearly looking. You know, it's very, very glittery. Not glitter. It doesn't. I don't think it's glitter. I think it's got like a very, very fine crystal perhaps in it. But it's quite shimmery. And you can buy iridescent paints, but this is a medium that you can add to your existing colors so that it's kind of will convert your colors into, you know, you can use your better quality paints and things like that into something very shiny. So let's try this one. zoomed right in because, you know, I want you to see the effect more clearly. Let's move up a bit here and to the right. All right, so zoom back in again here for this. And I'm going to take a little bit of my let's do the cobalt, and we'll mix a little bit of cobalt on my palette, and we'll add some of the iridescent medium to it. So I've dipped my brush in the iridescent medium, mixing it into this. And we will paint this on and see what this looks like dry. Put a little more on there. Try to get the color a little bit stronger. Alright, so I've got some color on there. It's got the iridescent medium in it. And we'll see what that looks like when it's dry. And right now it just looks wet. This does tend to settle, so you know you do need to kind of give it a little shake before you start. Masking fluid. Now I did do the permanent masking fluid earlier. This is the regular masking fluid. And I don't want to shake this because I just don't want to have a lot of bubbles in it, so I'm just sort of gently stirring it so I don't create a lot of bubbles. All right, and once again with my soap on my brush, because masking fluid can be a brush killer, and I will put my brush into the soap, coat the bristles, and then into the masking fluid. Right, it's a little bit thicker, so this, you know, we can do shape. We'll do, it's February, so we'll do a heart. And just like most of the other stuff, we have to allow that to dry. So I'm going to rinse that out of my brush. And we have a lot of stuff drying, so I'm going to just read back on some of the comments, because I'm sure there's going to be a question or two in there that I have not answered. Yes, Margot, I think that the iridescent medium could also make pearls, although I usually tend to create the effect with color more so than with the iridescent medium. The iridescent medium I haven't used too much in my actual paintings. I have used it on things like watercolor cards and stuff like that. I did once use it on a painting of Christmas ornaments because it kind of suited that type of thing. So I did use it on that painting, but it was really the only time I've ever actually used it on one of my, you know, larger scale paintings. But it's kind of a fun thing to try. I'm going to scroll back here now and just see how many questions I might have missed. Okay, not too many questions, except that I do have to try that crackle paste. That would be really cool. I mean, I have crackle paste or crackle medium for acrylics, and I don't know if that would be, I don't think it'd be compatible with watercolor, but I do have it for acrylics, and it's kind of a neat effect. Where can you get my paint palette? You mean this little one here? I got this one at Dollar Tree. So the thicker gum arabic is granulating the color. I don't know that. I don't think it might be just camera that is making it look like that. It looks pretty smooth to me, but Winsor Newton says their permanent masking medium is a liquid water repellent wax. Oh, okay, so it's a wax product. Liquid wax. Interesting. Okay. Acrylic pouring medium gives a shiny effect also. Yes. The pouring medium I haven't used too much. I mean, when I'm pouring, I generally just use water, but I do know that they make a pouring medium for watercolor as well. That's one I don't have, so that's one we're not going to be using today. Let me see. We talked about the powdered form. We've got, you can add Gall to water and mix with paint on palette to paint backgrounds that will flow and not dry too fast. Yes, it does kind of slow down the dry time a little bit too. Gum arabic is also one that will slow down that drying time. Water evaporates very quickly, but if you're using alternate mediums like the Gall, like the gum arabic, those will slow down. I mean, it's not going to buy you an hour or anything like that, but it will buy you a little more time. But it does tend to level things out a bit. It also helps with the flow. So can use masking fluid on damp paper for softer edges like seafoam. Yes, I did say I was going to try that, so let's give that a go. Thank you for reminding me. So I have seen masking fluid used on damp paper, believe it or not. So I'm going to dampen an area here. I will do masking fluid on dry paper, which is this heart. You can see it's colorless, but it's actually got a little color to it. Maybe because it's getting older. But it's still in good shape. It flows very well. Like it's pretty liquid. Masking fluid. I have to watch what I'm picking up here. Make sure I'm not picking up the wrong thing. Soak my brush again. And right next to this heart, I will do one on wet. So we'll see what that does. And I am going to try to make a shape. I'm going to try to make a heart. And we will see what happens when that dries. Take that masking out of my brush. All right, so that's going to dry a little while. I'm going to come back to my initial little patch here where I used the lifting preparation, right? So this is dry now. I'm going to try painting over top, and I'm going to use a different color just because I can. I'm going to use a, what is this one? Quinacridone Violet. Just going to use Quinacridone Violet on here. fact, I could probably use a couple of different colors on here. Why don't I use sort of some of it quinacridone violet, and then I'll use maybe a cerulean on the other side, just to make things interesting. All right, so the lifting preparation is on there. I'm gonna let that paint dry, and meanwhile, I'm going to come over here to my permanent masking fluid, which feels like it is dry now. So I'm going to take, this was a yellow, and I'm going to put red over top, and then I'm going to take the red one and I'm going to put yellow over top, just to see what the difference is here. So I'm going to take, didn't get all the blue out of my brush. Let's try that again. Take some nice bright yellow, and I'm going to paint this over top. Looks like it might not have been 100% dry. Darn. Okay, paint that over top, and I will paint Permanent Rose over top of the yellow one. In fact, I'm going to paint Permanent Rose over the one that is plain as well. All right, so there's the permanent masking fluid, and you can see that when you put a light color over it, it definitely seems to work better than putting a dark color over a light color. So that was pretty much the conclusion that I had come to before. Now, when that dries, I'm going to see if I can remove some of the excess color off of the permanent masking fluid, see if I can clean it up a little bit. We'll see what happens there. I am going to try this. This is still a little bit wet here. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but when I did the gum arabic here, the gum arabic, the one that had, lots of gum arabic mixed into it, has a little bit of shine to it. And I don't know if I'm catching that with my camera, but you can see that it's got kind of a shine, an unnatural shine to my watercolor, and it's not as even as you might think, but it has a bit of a shine to it. And sometimes if you may have noticed once in a while, if you've painted something, it's got a little shine to it. It could be that the paint in your tube has separated a little bit from the gum arabic that's in there, and so what you got is an excess of gum arabic, and that's why that little bit of paint is a bit shiny. So you've probably noticed once in a while when you take your tube and it looks like this oil is coming out. It's not oil, it's gum arabic, and so you really need to get that well mixed into your paint. So you might have to put out a little bit more paint to get that mixed in. Let me see if I've missed any other questions here. Iridescent medium, yeah. Is iridescent permanent? It is not. Do you mean could I re-wet the paper and paint and take it off? Yeah, I can do that. It is not a permanent thing. It doesn't dry hard. In other words, it is a watercolor medium. I think other than the permanent masking fluid, I think all of these are pretty much water soluble. They will reactivate when you put water back into it. But I'm kind of loving this granulation thing. I got to do more with that one. This texture medium is very interesting as well, but I said I would paint over top just to see what happens with the actual texture, whether the next color that I put down, whether it would settle into the valleys and things like that. So I'm going to paint over this just to see what happens there. Maybe a little more noticeable? What do you think? I have to be careful because you see I can remove color, right? I can see the blues moving around, even though it's had a pretty good long time to dry. I do have my little dots of gum arabic, but they're still wet. They're taking, I mean, like I said, you can add a little gum arabic to your paint and it does buy you a little extra time. It does slow down the dry time for sure. Yeah, I think you're right, Alyssa. I think that they call it colorless, but this actually does have a little color to it so that you can see it on your paper. It's just slightly yellow in color, or manila, if you want to call it that. Possibly, Margot, but like I said, you know, you're going to have to put, Margot's asking if you put a bit of yellow color with the iridescent medium for pearls. I suppose, yes, that could give you that. But what it won't give you is the iridescence. I know it's iridescent medium, but what it's not going to give you is like the reflected colors that you're going to pick, the pearl will pick up, right? It'll just kind of give it an overall even iridescence, but it won't show the reflections in pearls individually. But if you're doing a portrait and it's just a little tiny necklace or something like that, you know, maybe in that case, yes. But I have used pearls in a still life, and the pearls are a fairly prominent part of the arrangement. So I actually had lots of colors that were in that. So it wasn't, the pearls will reflect and pick up all kinds of color, especially since they have a shiny surface. So they're going to pick up all these iridescent or all these other colors, not just yellow. I believe, I don't know if it's on Facebook or if it's on YouTube, but I had demonstrated once a pearl quite extensively. I got quite into the nitty-gritty of creating these pearls in this demonstration that I did. And I can't remember if it was an old Facebook demo or not, but my Facebook page, by the way, is Shelley Pryor Fine Arts, same as it is here on YouTube. And when I started during COVID, I did start off with Facebook Live on, doing my demos, and then I switched over to YouTube. So some of my early ones are actually on my Facebook page, so just go to my page if you want to find that. You looked for my paint palette on Amazon and can't find it. Are you talking, Linda, I don't know if you're talking about this palette here. This is this round palette is a Speedball color wheel palette, and I believe Dick Blick has it. So, which someone told me they were able to get it there. I believe even Above Ground Art Supplies might carry it in Toronto. I'm not sure, but yeah, put in the search for Speedball color wheel palette, and I think you might have better luck. I haven't seen it on Amazon either, so that's not where you're going to find it. But yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad the timing was right for you, Mary. All right, so let's take a look here at this lifting preparation. I'm going to dry this. I'm going to speed things up a little bit here with this. This is my little heat gun. I won't use it on my masking fluid, but I'm going to use it on these other mediums just to see if I can hurry things up a little bit. All right, so this is my lifting preparation. Let's zoom in a little bit on this one. So I'm going to take just a regular synthetic brush here and a paper towel. And let's say I want to create a little bit of a highlight here. So I'm going to take my damp brush, see how easily I can lift from this. I can get quite a lot of paint off with the lifting preparation there. If I keep going, I think I can get pretty, I don't know that I'm going to get white again, but I'm definitely pulling lots of color off. So I was able to pull quite a lot off of that little section there. I was able to get back quite a bit of the paper. And obviously you can do softer effects too, right? A little lifting. Or a lot, so you can choose what you want. But it does seem to pull the color off pretty well. This is something that you would plan on from the start. Like, so, you know, if you know that you're going to be using a technique where you might be lifting a little color out, you know, plan for it. I am very near to Toronto, yes. I'm not in Toronto, but I'm very near. So kind of a neat thing. Now Arches paper. Now this is something. I mean, if you took something like this, I would try all kinds of things. I would try different textures of paper, different brands of paper, and different paints. And, you know, really deep dive into all the different things that it's capable of doing. And then you'll really have a thorough understanding of each of these mediums. But what I wanted to get across today is just sort of what's available in terms of mediums. So I'm going to move on down here to the next one. And I'm going to see if I can remove some of this paint that's sort of sitting on top of this permanent masking fluid. I don't know that it's ever going to leave the paper completely white, but we'll see. I'm trying to pull off that extra, but it looks like some of the permanent masking fluid still has grabbed some of that color. And so it's not going to come back to white paper or anything like that. Even if I scrub, I can't seem to get all of that off. So we'll see what the yellow one looks like. Not too bad. Seems to be better on the yellow. That's coming back pretty good. And that was the dark one. That's the experiment that I had done before. And I didn't have it as much success the first time I tried that, but that seems to be working a little better now. But that masking fluid is not going away. It's going to stay there. And you can see this one. Wow, this one's even beading up a little bit. It's definitely repelling the water. And there we go. So that's the permanent masking fluid. Clear, yellow, red, and then the opposites put on top. And now before, when I had shown you the gum arabic, this is gum arabic. It's dry. You can see the shine on it. So if you mix too much of it into your paint's going to have that funny oddball shine to it. But what I wanted to try here is to paint over some of this. Let's slide this. I always go the wrong way. All right, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to paint over this. This was my own little experiment I wanted to try. I'm going to try maybe some of this cerulean blue. And I'm going to paint over this, and then I want to try to see if I can lift out more easily where the gum arabic was, to see if that will actually make a softer highlight. So a highlight that could lift a little more easily. So let's paint this over top. Okay, so you can see where the gum arabic was. Now I'm going to try pulling off some of the gum arabic and see if I can get a softer highlight. Because the one thing I don't like about the masking fluid sometimes is how hard of a line it gives. Like, it gives this really harsh outline. So I'm wondering whether or not this will actually give me something softer. Seems to have worked pretty well. I can get that back to pretty much the white of the paper. That's a good thing. It did keep the paint from absorbing so much in that one spot. So let's try this one. Now I'm gonna, by the time I get to the last one, this will be a little bit drier, so we'll see. I'm wiping this off on my paper towel. So that might be an idea for, oops, my brush is getting too wet. I'm creating a blossom. But it might be an idea for when you need to get something soft and you want to lift back to pretty much the white of the paper. So that actually has worked pretty well, to my surprise. That was a worthwhile experiment. Now, blotting off my brush. I don't want my brush too wet because the paper's starting to get dry. And maybe this one I'll just leave and see what happens when that just dries. I'll just take the blue off of it and we'll just see what that one looks like when it's dry. So this one worked fine, but now this one is starting, because I worked at it a little bit, it's getting a little bit of a blossom around the outside, but I'm playing too long. That's my downfall, right? Played too long. So, back to, would lifting preparation be better than masking for creating seafoam on water? Possibly. I think you might even use a combination, right? What's to say you couldn't prepare your paper with lifting medium and add masking fluid, removable masking fluid, in a couple of areas where you do want crispness, and then put your color on there and lift out for the soft stuff, and then remove the masking for the harder stuff, right? Combinations of techniques here. So that's kind of interesting. But this really did give a softer outline. Speaking of outlines, I don't know if that masking fluid is dry. I think it is. I think my masking fluid over here is dry. So let's move on over to the masking fluid. Just watching my time here. We've been playing for a while here, but all right. So as you recall, we used this was masking fluid on dry. This was masking fluid on wet. So the telltale will be painting over top. So I'm using cerulean blue here. Let's just carry it on over to the other side. All right, let's speed up this drying, but I'll try not to cook my masking fluid because I don't want to get it overheated. Keep this moving. But while I'm drying this, just coming back for a second to that gum arabic. I have used this gum arabic for, to add the shininess to a water drop, but I've also used it to apply things like, there's something called glamour dust, and I don't know if I have any available with me, but if I'm painting Christmas cards or something, and I wanted to put a little shine in the snow, and I'll put it's called glamour dust, and you can buy it, it's like a little powdered thing, and you can just sort of paint it where you want to put a little shimmer in the snow, and then you can sprinkle that on, knock the excess off, and it just stays on there, and it will attach the glitter just where you want it. So that's kind of a neat way to do it too. All right, so it's not 100% dry. I mean, pretty close, pretty close. So I'm going to chance it here. And I'm going to remove my masking fluid, and predictably it has left a perfect shape and very crisp line. Now let's see what happens to the one where we use the masking fluid on wet paper. It lost its shape for sure. Oh my, not a lot of control there, but it definitely did give some softer edges for sure. A little bit unpredictable, but I can see applications for that. If you wanted to get something similar to a salt effect, and I think almost everybody knows what the salt is, right? Where you add you put wet paint down and then you add salt to it and it creates these little things. I can see that spattering on masking fluid onto a wet wash might give you a very similar look to the salt. If you wanted to try that. Into the paints and painted Christmas cards. Oh, yeah, the gum arabic. I was just reading Kathy's comment about putting gum arabic straight into the paints. It will make it. It'll take a long time to dry, and masking into wet paper. For clouds, perhaps. Yes, that could be. That's a definite good idea there, David. Yeah, using the masking fluid on a wet surface to create like that. That gives kind of an irregular shape, right? That's kind of a nice idea. I like that idea. Maybe even that sea foam you were talking about, right? Wet your paper, put a little of masking fluid in while it's wet, let it dry, and and remove that. I could see that as a seafoam kind of thing. Yeah, well, you're only limited by your imagination as to, different ways to apply these. So let's zoom out here and see what we've got. All right, we've got a whole bunch of experiments here. Let's see, is there anything that we haven't tried? I forgot what this one was. This was, let me look here. I forgot what this one was. I should have written it down. That was not permanent, not lifting, not... Was that gum Arabic? I forget what that was. Ha! I'll have to watch the replay now to label that, but it wasn't granulation, wasn't texture, it was... I've totally forgotten. But I remember we did something in that one. Anyway, I'll mark that one down. This is regular masking or removable. Iridescent medium, thank you. All right, so I made some notes there so that I can look back at this and I have a little bit of a reference for all of this. And let's take a look at this iridescent. Okay, let's see if we can... this is going to be hard for the camera to pick up, I think, because it's a very subtle shimmer. But I'm going to zoom in. I'll do my best to see if I can capture this with my camera. All right, let's see if I can tip this just the right way. I don't know if you can see the sparkling. There, can you see the sparkling? Probably not too much on camera. I'll try, let me go to autofocus here for a second, because as I pick it up, it will, I don't know, maybe you can see just a little tiny bit of shimmer on there. If I tip it that way. Yeah, a little hard to see. It's a really subtle thing, but it is there. You can also, by the way, add iridescent medium by itself on top of color, and that will be easier for you to see. So let's take some of that iridescent medium and add this on top. So this was mixed into the color. Now I will just add the medium directly on top, and I think you'll see the effect a little bit more. So I'll maybe do half of it, and I'll let some of it run over onto the paper, just the plain paper as well, just to see if we can get some of that showing. Maybe might show better on a light color. So we'll see. All right, so hopefully you can see, well, you're seeing some of the shine from it being wet, but let's dry this, and we'll see what that looks like when it's dry. I think it'll show more of the iridescence. Should. It could be also that this needs to be stirred rather than shaken. I've had this quite a long time, but maybe it doesn't have a lot of the iridescence in it. But I think it's, I'm seeing it now. Okay, so hopefully you can see. Now you can see the shimmer a lot better now that I've added it on top. So so you can see the effect that you get. It doesn't really give you that, that true sort of, what's it called, dichroic type of effect where you see like multiple colors with the shifting, like, you know, when a duck turns its head, for example, like a mallard duck, and turns its head, and all of a sudden you see you know it's got a green head, but then it turns its head and all of a sudden you see purples, right? So you don't get that type of effect from the iridescent medium, but it does give that little shimmer, which is really nice. Okay, so anyway, we had a lot of fun. That's pretty much all the mediums that I have that I can experiment with. But of course, if I can get my hands on some other ones, I might just have to give those a try too. We'll get together and play with that one as well. But let's see. There's all of our experimentation here, and yeah, hopefully you can try some of those things out and see what happens with that. And play around with things, try things out. It's great if you can sort of split some of these things with a friend. You know, just enough to experiment. You know, I had a friend who generously shared some of hers with me, and you know, I can share some of mine with her, kind of thing. So you know, grab a buddy and pair up to try out some different mediums, have a little fun with it. Don't try to do it on a painting. I would really recommend just, you know, playing and experimenting. Try different paper, try different colors. You know, lots of different ways. You know, put the medium down first, mix it with the medium. You know, see if it reactivates or anything like that. So lots of things. Opalescence, good description. Yes, that's kind of what that gives, David. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, I would use I would make sure you get all that masking fluid off, and I would dump that water before painting with it again. So, but anyway, hope you had a good time. I enjoyed playing with these, and I'm thinking, what can I do? What can I paint with some of these mediums now? I'm really, my favorite, I think, so far is this granulation, just to see what I can do with that. But I think the texture medium was very interesting too. I don't know that it really gives as much texture as I was imagining, but yeah, I'm going to have to definitely try some of that crackle stuff, the paste I don't have. Yeah, lots of different things that, but I think I got probably the majority of the mediums that are available. But I mean, they're always coming up with something new, right? So play around, have some fun, and I guess we'll see you next week. Thanks very much for joining me. Have a good one. Bye.